Hi, and welcome to Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast, highlighting artists, teachers, authors, and philanthropreneurs of the regenerative movement. My name is Julian Guderley. I'm your host and creator of the Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast, and I'm committed to a world that allows people from all walks of life to thrive. Also, recently we launched a Patreon. Go make sure to check it out. It's in the show notes. And today's guest is going to be Roxi Shohadaee. Roxi is the founder and CEO of habRitual. She's an interdisciplinary designer, experiential producer, artist, and a creative doula working at the intersection of art, science, experience, and technology to catalyze social and systemic change through inclusive transdisciplinary collaborations for the regeneration of our planet and our culture. Her path is grounded in a commitment to creating inspiring and embodied ways of learning together. She's the director and architect, I should say that right, architect of the Design Science Studio. So welcome with these words. Welcome, Roxi.
Thank you, Julian. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I stumbled over this word because it's such a great one. Architect. Let's start right there. You are an architect that creates art primarily.
Yeah, I didn't study architecture technically, but I am architecting structures for art in the world and creative flourishing and creative translation primarily.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think, when I think of architecture, I'm often a little disappointed in how uncreative and square boxed it has been on this planet and how much we've inherited from that. So the word art and architecture mixed, that's kind of a big craving of mine, is like creative solutions to many of the challenges we face and creative artistic solution that allow more people to express themselves.
Yeah, I studied with Regenerative the last few years. I'm still studying with them. They're an organization that has different courses on regenerative development and design. And what I found when I did my regenerative practitioners program, which was the first program that I did, I'm in a different one now, was that there were a lot of architects. And I was very pleasantly surprised that there are so many architects studying regeneration and how we can really use the tools of regenerative design to flip the script on architecture. And also, a lot of them aren't typical practicing architects. They're really thinking about architecting the mind, architecting spaces, and that is beyond the physical. So I think part of that sort of steeped into this title of architecture.
Very nice. Tell us a bit more about the Design Science Studio and what you're building with the DSS right now. I'm part of the first cohort. I know it's a decade-long program. Maybe great to share this up front. And in this first year, there's 144 of us coming together to really bring design and science into kind of a cohesion. And I love what you started there. I love the cohort. I love what's happening. Even though as the first cohort, we're probably guinea pigs, but I'm curious to know more. And I know you have a little presentation for everyone who's watching the video. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I'll tell you about the studio, and maybe after we can talk a little bit about the origin of it. So yes, I'm so grateful and excited that you are in our first cohort of a decade-long program. And the Design Science Studio is a program of habRitual, my creative studio, and the Buckminster Fuller Institute. And at its heart, it's an educational incubator and accelerator for the art of the Regenaissance. And so what we call the Regenaissance, I think it's important to kind of flip the script a little bit to talk about kind of the difference between the Renaissance and the Regenaissance, because like a lot of times people are like, what does that mean? So since it's here, I will speak to it briefly. So as many of us are familiar, not everyone, but I went to art school, so I definitely studied it. The Renaissance was this like critically influential cultural movement, which brought about a period of scientific revolution, political and economic rebirth, and transformation through art at the dawn of modern European history. And creators were really funded to focus all of their energy on their craft. And this Renaissance period promoted the rediscovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art as a pivotal tool for social and systemic change. And in history, it marked this transitional period between the end of the Middle Ages and the start of the modern age. And so the Regenaissance is kind of this regenerative renaissance, and it's coming, this mashup of this new word is really coming from this place of seeing how interdisciplinary art, and through interdisciplinary art, we can transform our path forward, regenerate our culture, our planet, and our relationship with the living world. And we really see that there's the power in art and design as a cross-cultural technology and language for systemic change. And so that's kind of where the Design Science Studio genesis is one of the rooting kind of factors of it. And
yeah, that's a powerful place to start. Let me just jump in there for a second, because I feel like the word, regenerative and then the word Renaissance, they go together so well. And this is, what I've been intending to capture since the beginning of this podcast journey as well, is like, who are the individuals, the collectives, the groups, the organizations, the artists, the entrepreneurs that are committed and understand that, environmentally fit or sustainably inclusive didn't quite really make the cut. And I mean, everything is just words until we look at the actions associated with it. But the regenerative piece is the piece of nature's inherent brilliance, right? Like the miracle implicit within nature is that there's regeneration happening. And so us creating from that place is almost like the next logical step. And I love the arc all the way back to the Renaissance time, because really, truly, a cultural movement can only start by the people.
Yes. And I think that, there's such we're in this really yummy and challenging time. And the studio was kind of born to empower these global creators to imagine this regenerative future. And that can help ignite conversation, catalyze inspiration and action globally to help lead the transition to a world that works for 100% of life, which is so much of the root of the studio, right? Whenever you signed up and you decided to register and say yes when we warmly accepted you into the cohort, one of the key things that you had to say was like that you would align your work, that your work aligned in some way with making a world that works for 100% of life. And so that is it's an honor to help be part of a bigger system to support bringing together a global community of creators in this time of such upheaval and radical systems change, right? Where this pandemic has given us such a bright light and illumination on all of these decades of over-industrialization, the separation from nature, and othering of other cultures, other ways of being, and like through the separation and the illumination of the inequity that is embedded in the way that we operate. It's also showing us that these are some of the primary root causes of environmental degradation and inequity and poverty and illness. And so we're in this like really rich time. And in this same period, right, there's this like deep inspiration that's coming about in people like you and in this broader movement globally, as everyone's questioning all of these systems that are crumbling. And people are weaving a new narrative that is actually interwoven with nature and isn't leaving anyone behind, because it's just, we know that we have literally everything that we need to take care of everyone. And we have more than what we need to have a world that works for all. But our systems aren't set up to support that. And so, the studio is like trying to help propel and create more coherence globally through supporting and uplifting a creative community as a part of this movement to help articulate this possibility of a healthy planet through this decade-long mission of nonviolent, design-led creativity expressed revolution. And it's a response, and it's our responsibility, our ability to respond, and it's built to build the capacity of our creative community to feel tooled up and able to connect with this mission and the other organizations, initiatives, and individuals who are shepherding a way forward through their creative expression. And that like is super vast, as you've seen, right? But one of the things I wanted to quickly respond to that you just mentioned before getting into who's in the studio is the story that you were speaking to. You were saying, like, you know, when we look back to the Renaissance and we're thinking about it now, like the story, the narrative, and the people are really what helps propel change. And there's really powerful examples that we can look back to as far back as, you know, Guernica. And that one, you know, which was possibly Pablo Picasso's most famous work. It was a super powerful political statement, an immediate reaction to the Nazis' devastating casual bombing practice in the vast town of Guernica during the Civil War. And the tour of this piece of art helped bring the Spanish Civil War to the world's attention. And it became this mark of humanity. And the message is still understood by people all over the world. But it showed what protest art, can do to help bridge together collective understanding. And we see this now, like most recently, I think one thing that we've all been, in many ways, like I'm humbled and privileged to feel that I got to be a part of the current Black Lives Matter movement that is alive and like happening day in and day out in America where I live. And I, you know, through a 1.5-minute long cartoon, I learned deeply about what systemic racism really meant. Even though I thought I understood it, it like transformed my understanding. And that was through an animation, right? And, you know, there's other examples like the designated driver campaign. That one is a really good one. It was from a Harvard University partnership with film studios. And because they introduced it in film, then like it ended up saving thousands and thousands of people's lives. So it's interesting to think about how art can change history. And so we're committed to helping support that through the studio.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, this sparks so many different, you know, kind of pathways of the mind of how I relate to art. And I think how everyone listening relates to art. Art has this transcendent capacity to literally actually help us stop taking ourselves so serious, reflect, step back, see it from another person or another being's perspective through an animation, through a painting, through a statement piece, and suddenly be like, oh wow, well, maybe it is time to move on, or maybe it is time to change the perspective, or maybe it is time to, you know, step back from our current systems and understand how could they actually support all of life. Art has this like something extra special that allows us not to get lost in the mind's voice of reason and right or wrong, but to instantly kind of reflect.
Yeah, it brings about this sense of wonder and this like full embodied experience. The roots of my care for all of this, which is a little bit of a segue, but it's emerging, so I'll share it. I have always been an artist and like an academic and a total nerd and like a lover of the earth, like just cycles of that in my childhood, like reading encyclopedias and like making anything that I can make and like playing outside and just being with the earth as much as possible. And that really hasn't changed that much. But as I grew, I noticed that the educational system was not fully meeting the potential of how people learn. Because we have so many different ways of learning: aesthetic, auditory, visual, through experience, shared experience. Like you can read a ton, but then all of a sudden you have a 1 hour long experience and something really sinks in. And it levels the playing ground when you share an experience as well. You're feeling together, you're learning together, and you're often in this state of wonder and suspended belief. And through that experience, whether it be as an individual with an individual work of art or through a shared collective experience, whether that be a workshop or a large scale interactive art exhibit, who knows? But there's something different that can happen in that space. And so that's why I've really focused on that intersection of art and experience and how it can catalyze social and systemic change through merging disciplines and helping people learn together and giving them that opportunity to access information in a new way that really has a more, it can reach more people, and through that it like breaks down barriers of like the privilege of knowledge, which I think is for everyone, and there's no reason why it needs to continue to feel like this separate academic practice. And I know that you're doing that day in and day out with this podcast, and your mission in the world is like helping to transcend some of these barriers to knowledge and to just curiosity. Like curiosity is an incredibly important principle of regeneration. Like it to be curious as designers, as creators, as individuals, as we move through this world, in a commitment to increasing the vitality of anything that we're moving into or with, of like, who is the larger system that what I care about is connected to? How connected am I to them? Is this thing that I think that I'm doing that's going to be so great actually in resonance with what's needed? And can I be like curious and playful enough to continue to redirect the course and prototype and test so that I can really be in harmony with what really will support and uplift this mission?
Yeah, I love that you're mentioning curiosity there, and curiosity and trust kind of go hand in hand for me on that. For one, like leading with curiosity or being led by it, it's probably one of the most inherent gifts to the human consciousness, or the expression of consciousness at a large, because as children we all have this so innate, it's so clear that you follow your curiosity, and as we're transitioning from children into teenage times and into adulthood, often the adults come up with this idea that now we got to take everything serious, and there is no more playing and gaming, and curiosity as our primary kind of direction sign maybe. But I'd love to challenge that, because I think almost everything in our life, when we at least allow that perspective in, and we allow the artistic expression to be one of the valves of like releasing pressure, or one of even the bridges that connects us to what else is possible, I think our iteration process would be a lot faster. And what I mean with that is that right now in the world, we're having such a hard time letting go of a dying system, a system that's clearly not worked to bring food and shelter and healthy water to every single person on the planet, even though we know the resources and the capacity and the technologies are actually present. And so I think this, bringing it back to curiosity, it's a great bridge builder to say, well, wouldn't it be curious if that is actually possible? Like, what would it take for us to actually go sideways and accept the detour, but then end up at like a quantum evolution of what was possible just a year ago?
Yeah, that's a lot of where I think the world game came from. I've been learning about the world game through the studio. Buckminster Fuller tried to see like, how can we make a game of this to help pique people's curiosity about, okay, we do have all the tools, like what might we need to do? Speculative design is also a really good tool for this as well. These different ways of frameworks of thinking that can help like beckon the curiosity out of people, and just like there's like the possible, the plausible, and the probable, and as far as our futures go, and just like get out of what we think is probable and like lean into what might be possible, what the potential we see, even if we don't know how to get there, and then figure out, like, often there's a really incredible group of artists. They're a team, and they're married, and they have a space called the Center for the Force Majeure in I think it's in Santa Cruz, but they created some like speculative designs of these different landscape ecological systems that would be more in harmony with and in tune with the natural systems around them. And they were just speculating on what could be, as far as our human models for the local building codes, and just the way that like the structures were set up for our kind of government and human relating systems with the space. So they created all these maps and these like potential ways of like ecologically kind of being more regenerative, and some art about it. And a lot of it wasn't necessarily something they knew was possible, but because they made art about it and they created like a whole world about it, it actually led to innovation. And scientists looked into the possibility, and now some of the things that they proposed that were not particularly probable are now possible, and actually like sparked innovation and like a new way of, and there's like new building codes, new laws in place that were all kind of propelled through their creative exploration. And so it's always really like fascinating. Same for like, remember sci-fi, like the Jetsons, whatever. It's like, maybe that's not possible, but like, let's dream about it. And sometimes that actually really helps people kind of get out of what they can see, because what we can see is so much built on like who we've been and where we've been and what we have seen fail and the suffering. And we're like, oh, I don't know if all this is possible. But it is. And often we just aren't able to see beyond what we know yet. And it's a privilege. It's an absolute privilege. And it's not to be, I take it very seriously. Every day I wake up and I'm like, I am lucky that I am healthy, that I am safe, that I have a house, that I have the privilege to even care enough to create things that I see in my own heart as possible. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that came from just deciding. Like when I was young, I'm still young, I'm 32, but when I was, kind of transitioning out of high school and this became my mission in the world, I decided that I didn't want to adhere to the normal, quote unquote, way of approaching adulthood. And I said, I'm going to focus on the things that I care about. And I am going to figure out a way to really have that be my life. And I'm going to trust, coming back to trust, I'm going to trust that the universe will conspire in my favor and I will be able to be successful in that. As far as the success looks like in the world, I will be able to sustain myself and I will be able to do what I care about. And it worked. And also, like, one of the principles, again, through Regenesis that I was studying as far as regeneration goes, since your podcast is so much about regeneration, was about building capacity in a system. And so when I shifted from, I've done a lot of large scale immersive installations, both in cities and in land-based projects for over a decade, and worked with, projects that bring in hundreds or thousands or 100,000 people. And there's at a certain point when you realize that there's only so much you can do, either as a lead or a collaborator on a project. But if you build the capacity in an entire system, then it can help itself. And so the studio was born of, my, as I said, my creative studio, habRitual, but also with Buckminster Fuller Institute and Amanda Ravenhill, who I know has been on the podcast and is like such an incredible inspiration to myself and so many. We started working together 8 years ago and nerding out and just being like, what can we do at the intersection of art and planetary stewardship together? And so we did some design stuff. Her and her partner Ryan Kushner and I, we created this thing called Ghosts of the Future, which was a haunted house that was like our foreseeable future if things don't change, with like a solution space, and it was a full-on haunted house with like strobe lights and actors. And anyway, so we've been trying to figure this out for a while, but in the space of this like eco-anxiety, like, what do we do? How do we help? Are we doing enough? We had this like sort of visual, like if we stand on the tallest mountain with the loudest megaphone, we'll never be able to have as much impact as if we build the capacity of every single person to be able to do that themselves. And so that's, the studio is built from there. It's built from a place of supporting that in people.
That's such a powerful story, Roxi, and I'm glad you shared a few pieces of it. And definitely let's dive in deeper into the mission of the studio as well. I just want to reflect on what you just shared. What comes up for me is this like famous Steve Jobs quote that I'm only able to recite partially, which is about seeing the red thread in retrospect. Once things happen, you're like, oh yeah, right, that's where that red thread went, left ways around and then connected me back with purpose. And so I think while we're doing, while we're acting, while we're, learning to regenerate both soils and waterways and also our culture, our society, our systems, it's not always visible where that red thread is actually leading us. And so because it's not always visible, and because it is about jumping off the deep end sometimes, and learning as we're going through curiosity, that uncertainty is inherent in all of life, right? Like there's this famous Pema Chodron quote where she says, if you're looking for safety and security, you're on the wrong planet. And so because of that, I want to just, really highlight what you said there. What I was hearing is that it's all about the capacity building, and the building the capacity to actually hang out in this almost uncomfortable space where we're going beyond the anxiety of our maybe climate related times and the anxiety of our the impact we had on the biosphere and our ecosystems over the last 100 years. And as we're leaving that anxiety behind, we're actually building capacity and resilience to say, oh, wow, this is quite the dire time in human history. There's a lot of forgiving that needs to happen. There's a lot of reconciliation between cultures, between structures and infrastructures, between ways of seeing the world. And then the question comes up, like, what are we committed to? Are we actually committed to building a world together that works for everyone? Or are we just committed to continuing the, the paradigm of enriching the self only? And so I think that capacity building part of it is something I just wanted to highlight one more time before we go deeper into the mission of the Science Studio, because when it comes to capacity building, well, how could we do that without trust? And we kind of started talking about trust already. So there's a question in there for you. And the question is, what does it take for you personally to allow trust in, to surrender into trust, or to actively apply your trust in a project, in a collaboration, to another individual, or even maybe an entire mission?
What does it take? Say that one more time.
What does it take for you to experience trust?
And you're saying with collaborators or in general?
Well, that's totally up to you where you want to start answering the question. I could give you some crutches to go into it, but why don't you just maybe start general and then get specific?
Yeah, I think, what does it take for me to build to establish trust?
Well, to establish, or better so to experience it, like
To experience it.
because once we're still questioning, am I trusting, am I not trusting, you're not really truly experiencing it, and so you're not able to fully
right.
Leverage all of your energy. And so I think this is a question that is
Well,
a lot of people are not clear on how their trust actually works, and without it, we know we can't really build big capacity.
For sure. I think there's a few things that come to mind. One is either a written or unwritten set of principles. So kind of understanding that I'm in company that is in alignment with a way of being and communicating. And I think that as a designer, my most successful experiences that I've created have been ones that have clear principles to support the community's coherence and what we're stepping into. And when I think about like the experiences that I've personally had where I felt like the most comfortable and safe and trusting, I immediately, for some reason, think of like festivals and, those spaces. Like, I don't know all the people who are there, but I know that people are there because they want to, like, they're in a space of like deep presence and shared experience and celebration of life. And so in that space, that's kind of an unwritten, set of not rules, but principles that feels like I can really like soften into it. And that works across, when I think about collaborations and teams as well. But whenever I think about spaces where I don't feel trust, what comes to mind is there's like also like a felt sort of intuitive spiritual sense that I think, it's something that we don't talk enough about in culture and in our lives as a like an inherent part of how we operate. But we have like a deep intuition that is embedded in our beings, in our bones, in our,
100%. Yeah.
and I think we get signals as well from the earth. There's this really cute image that I recently saw, and it was like a little, actually I'll try to find it and share it. There's this little guy inside the planet, and he's like taking up most of the inside, and then his little fingers are sticking up out of the edge of the earth, and they like are appearing to be different, and it's like us appearing to be separate. And so it's like this inherent, like this dissolving of this separation, because we are, part of one larger system and one larger body, as we know through Gaian systems theory. And that, that's scientifically proven, but also it's felt that we can kind of sense make through our beings and through our bones. And so I think building trust is a complex question, but I feel the feeling of trust comes from this combination of either written or unwritten principles. At least for me, I'll speak for myself, an embodied kind of like sense of safety. And then from there, I think, play, there's some element of play that is also important. And that like gives you, there's like a trust that's built in to say like, it doesn't have to be perfect. The journey is the destination, and through like a container that gives you the space to be wrong and celebrate your spaces where you can do better, and not like feel like you have to have it right. Then like there's more trust that's built. It's like, cool, this is something that we're collectively building towards. So I think to build that and to be a part of creating a space for that, it takes a lot of care and listening, and being open to really like course correcting and adjusting what's there, and not just what you think you need to do or what you think it still look like, but really being receptive.
That's a big one, yeah. The being receptive part, the like having intuition, finding ways to reconcile this with like the thinking mind, the scientific mind, and understanding it's actually like very much proven. There's the Heart Math Institute talks a lot about the heart intelligence and the center of intuition, the heart, and scientific empiric data that prove that our heart has like literally a felt and experienced intuitive spark even before things happen. And so yeah, I love your answer. It's a big topic, trust, and I think moving at the speed of trust is what replaces the desire to control and have power over. And so that's why I'm on that pursuit of understanding what does how does trust happen in between people? How does trust happen for you? How does trust happen for me? And then how do we build a society, but also just like subsets of society where we can trust each other. And because of that, when there's groups or cities or towns, entire towns trusting each other, now a lot more of that creative energy can come through rather than following just the old guidelines of what used to be possible in one of the yesterdays. But I know, Roxy, you have a bit more of about the science studio to share, and so I'd love to circle back into what's really emerging in that cohort.
Perfect. Yeah, I think there's kind of two things that come to mind, and I'll share. I'll keep telling you more about and all of your wonderful the audience. Hello, whoever you are listening. I just wanted to pin this quickly because we're talking about the design science decade, and there's one thing that you mentioned, which is this like period of reconciliation. And so the decade is built there was originally a design science decade from like 1965 to 75 that Buckminster Fuller proposed, let's see how over the course of a decade we can like shift the tides to make the world work for everyone. And we've rekindled that through the studio. And we happen to be in this phase of reconciliation and commitment, which I think is quite ironic, because reconciliation has come up so much. And this is never meant to be didactic. It's meant to, or it has to be this way. It's more meant to be like a light framework to say like, okay, we're going to have to kind of go through some different phases. And Amanda speaks to them very beautifully. And I'll touch on them very lightly and go back to a broader context of the studio. But we'll, the essence of it is that, you know, there's tools that we have when we use design science. It comes from this kind of comprehensive anticipatory design science. So comprehensive being start with the whole, anticipatory being like, let's think ahead. Design is all about creating intentionally. And then the science is discovering through experience. And so the phases are meant to, they're actually kind of a embodied part, expression of that. Like if we know that we want to get somewhere, let's like really be integrative in our approach and like see what are the steps. Let's like see where we want to go and then backcast to get there. And so in the spirit of backcasting to get there, the period that we're in right now is all about reconciliation and commitment. And we're like committing to this mission as a part of it. So I just wanted to double tap that, just because you were speaking about reconciliation.
Absolutely, and it's so visible in our society right now. Let's triple tap that. Let me ask you a question on it.
Sure.
So reconciliation and commitment, I think, you know, every single one of us has their own way of how they're experiencing that right now, and then we see how as a collective we're experiencing that as well. Now the question for you, Roxi, is, you know, that being the context, what do you think it actually takes for humanity at a large to learn from past mistakes?
What does it take to learn from past mistakes? It takes, you know, one thing that I see is very much missing in our culture is our capacity to integrate. And it's just not currently as present in our process, because we're just like, let's keep going, at least in America, right? Like I'm Colombian and Iranian, born and raised in America. And this place, and I know it's also very present in much of the world, is all about like progress, obsession with progress and moving and bigger and more. And I think to really learn from our mistakes or our mishaps or the steps along the way, we have to have integrated into that progress and forward movement a process for refining and reviewing and kind of integrating our lessons. Otherwise, they're this sort of like passive subconscious thing that we like kind of do, but we kind of don't. We just like keep going. And so this like retroactive like gratitude for our failures as like fertile ground for seeing how we can do better and what we've learned is I think incredibly integral and primarily missing from the way that we relate. And that I think is part of why, you know, this period is all about understanding what our root causes of this interconnected crisis are, at the same time as kind of making these commitments, even, although we don't know the whole path how to get there. And so I think as we identify some of these root causes, to learn and move forward, we see that we're, you know, separated from nature. There's like such a narrow focus and reductionism. We avoid kind of this inner work. There's like a myopic thinking around our like quarterly profits, and like we're just so deeply embedded in the way that like colonialization and othering is embedded in the way that we operate, whether we recognize it or not. And this sort of scarcity mentality breeds more selfishness, when really we could live in a space of like abundance, of understanding we have more than enough for everyone. We could be in a space of generosity and knowing that if I win, you win. If you win and I don't quote unquote win, I still win because you are thriving. And through like understanding our, a deeper coherence around our diversity and inclusion, setting reparations, taking the long view, attending to the trauma that is so precious inside of us and so important to slow down and regenerate our own relationships with ourselves. Then we see ourselves in a larger system context. We can build different governance models and have a reverence for the interdependence that fuels life and then move. But like it's sort of missing and a lot of the way that we approach. So I think that's part of why this like first phase that we're in is all about reconciling and being okay with that so that we can move forward.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. I really appreciate just hearing and letting that drop in. I think commitment and this phase we're in with commitment, for me, there's a different perspective that comes up. It's not just about what are the commitments that are coming out of this current phase. It's also we're currently seeing, I would agree that there's a big we as humanity, but then there's 7 to 8 billion different lenses of what this big we is experiencing. And so many people are just showing what they're committed to very clearly in this time. So if you're committed to a political farce and trying to solve everything through politics and economics, your commitment will be very obvious. If you're committed to keep, dying industries alive through subsidies, that commitment is becoming blatantly obvious in our information age. And so because some of those commitments are so, they're simply not aligned with everyone thriving on the planet. I think those of us who see, okay, maybe the old guard or some of the political and governmental bodies are still committing to this, like these empty promises that, our commitment on the other side, on the artistic, philanthropic, social, entrepreneurial, regenerative, integrated, inclusive, let's just call it an agenda, our agenda actually needs us to commit stronger and clearer and step up, because otherwise we'll continue to leave the floor for people that are committed to, maybe a world that isn't one in which everyone thrives. Like one of the things that always has boggled my mind, and I'm curious to hear about that from your perspective, is how we could truly tell ourselves that we don't have enough food and enough things for everyone on this planet, that we're suffering from overpopulation. It never quite made sense in my mind, because so clearly the planet is providing everything all the time. We just need to learn to connect with that, cycle of abundance, if it's from seed to tree to fruit to seed and then coming back to the seed, or if it is through sharing, right, and really helping each other, or if it's simply overcoming pesticides and understanding that we went wrong there for quite a few decades. I'm curious for your reflection on that, Roxi, because I think commitment really means a lot of different things in that context.
Yeah, I think something happens when we slow down to say, like, okay, if I'm really committed to this, are my actions in alignment with that? Is the work that I'm doing in alignment with that? And is what I'm standing for in alignment with that? And that separation is still evident because we're in a process of transformation. We actually have a upcoming artist salon, and we just landed on the name of it, which I bring up because it's so relevant to this. It's called Dissolve and Bloom. And so the next salon will be, it's like thinking about like, how do we dissolve from our illusion of separation, and like kind of, and thinking about fungal blooms and actual blooms of flowers or whatever it is, or like the sprout of like what comes from this compost. And I think like there's compost in the process of commitment to refine over. And there are current commitments that are just not seeing the full picture. And some people who do, right? They see the full picture, they understand, and yet they stand where they stand for whatever reasons. But often it's and this is my own personal opinion, and I know that it is likely not perfect and not complete, but it's I feel like if people could see that they can still be in this abundant, successful, thriving place and do work that supports that, then they would not be so attached to their old ways of working and being, because they knew that they would be safe. And this comes back to trust, and this comes back to safety, and this comes back to stability, because at our core, we're
so interconnected,
you know? And we're like need to know that we can take care of our families or ourselves or our communities. And if we know and we feel stable and strong, that like if we're running this oil company and that's kept my family safe for this coal industry for hundreds of years, and they're ignoring the fact that like for the, you know, the coal, I'm from Tennessee, and like mountaintop removal is just very, very, very still alive and well there, although it's shifting, but it's definitely not gone. And a lot of those, like I got really close to seeing the people who were in charge of these mountaintop removal coal mining industries, and then the communities that lived at the bases of these mountains who were dying of cancer and poisoned children, and their water running out of their faucets was yellow and orange and gray because of the way that, and those, the people who understood that, they were like, yes, but it's providing power to all these people. And my families and communities are well, and they could just move. But those people don't have the privilege to move. They're being poisoned, and they barely have anything, and they're sick on top of it and everything else. And so it's like that like sort of commitment cycle is confused, because those people are like, I'm committed to where I live. I feel safe in this place. But although I'm being poisoned, and I'm meant to understand that my government and my people are looking after me, when really like that's not their bottom line. And all of that can and could and will shift once we can create more visibility to the world that a different way is possible. And in order to kind of move into these possible futures, it's important to see them in some way. And I think that that's also part of what the studio does so beautifully, is this commitment to supporting a visioning and to transform this collective capacity and create this harmonic future. We must envision it, and by making the invisible visible, we can help propel and speed up that process. And it's not always visual, right? Like what you're doing is auditory, and that's an important set. It's like some people will just listen to this, and that will be pivotal for them. Not this talk, maybe it will, and that would be great, but others also, I'm sure. But just like these different avenues of integrating a new vision and seeing and feeling, and not only seeing and feeling, but experiencing that is possible, is like so important and imperative. Like I get super fired up about the fact that like, yes, we have more than enough to feed everyone, but like our distribution systems are fucked, and that their subsidies are where? In corn, when they should be in like proper distribution of the ample materials that we have to give the harvests of this beautiful earth to all people, so they can feel safe and they can have what they need to be able to be privileged and create from a place of potential for their families and their future. And that's not impossible, and that is something we can do in our lifetime, and we will. I really think that we can. And we will. And
yeah, I'm really there with you as well. And I you know, I love your passion.
I know, I'm like,
with that question. But this is also why I love these conversations, and I'm committed to continue to interview epic people like yourselves, and continue to dive deeper into what actually has us be upset and frustrated, that then empowers us, and that then really puts kind of the wind into our sail to say, you know what, I'm not going to stop until regeneration is a normal modus operandi on this planet, or I'm not going to stop until we have a holistic vision for this planet, and we're realizing that we didn't really have like an axis mundi, like a central pillar on this planet, other than maybe profit and power. But at this point, we realize profit and power have done certain things for us, have harmed other pieces of ourselves. But really, there's only one path forward, and that is us as one with nature, the way ancestral cultures and indigenous cultures have always known and have never forgotten. And so to relearn this as we're evolving into a high and technology culture that probably really soon won't even have cell phones anymore, but we'll just think it onto our screen, you know. That's the challenge of our age, and that's a challenge that I don't want anyone listening right now to feel like we're letting that just pass by us, you know. And so that's what drew me to the Design Science Studio and what you're doing with habRitual and the Buckminster Fuller Institute, knowing that there are so many people out there, like literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that are looking to apply themselves, that are looking to get active and build the world they believe in, and not wait anymore until, you know, there's a next update from your cell phone, your government, your news station. And not to completely, like, you know, talk about this in only negative ways. I think there's just like a lot of old agreements from old levels of consciousness on this planet that don't actually serve us in our true interconnection anymore. And so as we're witnessing this now, it's ours to kind of flip this on its head and recreate structures and systems. And my question for you, Roxi, and I want to invite you to share whatever else you want to share that comes up in this context. But my question is, if you were to drop in, and maybe close your eyes for a second here with me, and you were to drop in and say, what is the dream, the deep vision that's, you know, in your heart, in your visionary mind for this planet? I would call it like your holistic vision for this planet in a you know, multi-generational perspective. So if you were to say, I'm here to be an ancestor for the future, what's the dream inside of you that you want to share with this world and you want to make sure it becomes real?
I think I'm living it right now. Like this decade-long mission that we're on with the studio feels so in alignment with like that, which I've been like moving towards for so long. And that vision really is supporting a transfer of wealth to people to be able to feel resourced and supported, and wealth in many ways, right? Like frameworks, community, money, connection, like a visibility in a system, knowledge, shared understanding, and like being a bridge and a pathway to helping translate these interconnected web of solutions to empower creators of all kinds, you know, and that's like everything from a farmer to a data visualization scientist to a performer to, you know, the myriad of different transdisciplinary creators in the world, and like really help them feel supported and resourced and connected to this broader movement and system, and be able to help to share these visions of not only a possible future, but a very probable one now, to help support and aid in this transition forward for those future generations, to be in harmony with nature, to work with technology in a way that is nourishing and is accentuating our potential as an interconnected species and a keystone species, to help. And as a keystone species, we can, you know, like a beaver, like we have a huge impact on our environment, right? And to like help give people that safety, stability, and support that they need to feel like, you know what, I can do what's in my heart. If I focus on what I care about, there is a way to bring it forward and have a deep and lasting impact for the generations to come. And just because this seems easy now doesn't mean that I can't make something else easy too, and create ease for others to choose a better path that is more connected and uplifting, and understanding those like cascading benefits and all of the cycles ahead, before and beyond, that are affected and connected to each thing. And it's a lot, right? It's a lot to be constantly thinking about, but like creating a path of ease for that. Like it feels like my deepest heart song, to really, really support and uplift a global community, to be able to feel empowered and clear that they will and they do have the support that they need to be able to bring about a world that works for everyone. And like to get to be in that and like being one key part and of that, and the founding visionary, or one of the the original founders of this, you know, it was primarily myself and Amanda, and Faith started this whole thing. But so much of it did, you know, at least the like art support part of it is so much like coming through, and it's coming through me. Like I will never say that this is mine. Like this is just like Gaia has like chosen me, and it has been so much of my mission for so long because I care so much. And it is like my deepest desire is to like help give people that sense of safety and embodied understanding that this path forward is not only possible but probable, and that everyone is needed and no one can be left behind in this process. No matter if the bridges that need to be built for coherence are with people who have such different perspectives on what matters. Trying to create pathways to understand why there's so much division, what it is they care about, and how they can see how they can be supported in what they care about through this transition as well, right? Like we just went through this crazy election. Thank goodness we're like in a transition now, and now Biden's being president. Half of America chose another way. Why? Because that's how they feel. And like they're still people and they still matter, and we need them too. And so trying to create more pathways for building bridges and understanding and like moving people towards this future together that is not othering and separating, but is like patient and loving and nurturing and will move us there is so important to me. And as an artist and a designer, and I say creative doula because, right, like a midwife like helps you have the baby. The doula helps you have the baby. Like you can have the baby. This is alive in you. And like, it is my greatest honor to support that coming to life in everyone. And it's not easy, and it's not going to be perfect, and it's going to take time, and it's going to be fun. We're going to figure it out.
We're going to figure it out. I like that. This is a great note to, you know, bring this interview to, you know, to land and, you know, close our little first session here together, Roxi. You know, we and I talked about, and I want to share this in this episode. There'll be a small series coming out of the Design Science Studio that I'm going to be hosting with Green Planet, Blue Planet, and highlight some of the different artists and creators that are part of that cohort. Also to inspire all of you listening to apply in the future to, you know, the annually happening kind of evolution of what Roxi, habRitual, the Buckminster Fuller Institute, and the Design Science Studio are putting together, and, you know, helping all of us to empower this time of regeneration, this time of change, this time of shift on the planet, and, you know, to hold each other up and also accountable to not stop, because this is, I think, one of the fundamental principles of embracing change and embracing that which is emergent, is to really give it a real shot, and to not stop once we're in this creative kind of rhythm, and hold the dying systems accountable that it's actually time to pass, you know, the baton of power, of money, of influence to, you know, what you're saying, like what we're collectively giving birth to, and what, you know, birth doulas like yourself, creative doulas like yourself are helping bring into a collective cultural stream, maybe all the way to mainstream, into a shared reality that allows all people and non-people to thrive on this planet.
Yeah. And I think to sort of prep for like the future conversations, it would be helpful for me to share just like a last little tidbit about the like structure, right, that's inside of the studio to really scaffold and mentor and fund creators. And so we have this cohort of 144, which means by 2030 we'll have over 2,500 projects stewarded into the world, ripples throughout the decade, and millions of people reached. And as mentioned before, right, the studio is a part of this mission, this global mission. And so we're helping to connect projects to inspire millions of people to imagine a new way of being, and connect with different strategic partners, different regenerative initiatives, public and private sector partnerships, to engineer new visions of what's possible in partnership with these other stakeholders that are along for that are on this mission with us. And so in this process of amplifying creative expression and connecting these initiatives and change makers, and companies and creators to amplify their messages, we're birthing media that inspires this collective action. We're providing resources that foster storytelling for change, for different creative campaigns and for creators themselves. And the building blocks of the studio are kind of this curriculum component, which is this like embodied education, building bridges for systemic understanding. The community layer, where we have all of these creators connected, so this global cohort, but also connected to partners in the movement for mutual support and collective action. And then really like showcasing the work, so powerfully weaving, scaffolding, funding, and launching this art that changes history. And there's so many incredible artists. You know, I'll highlight 4, and there's 144. So there's Brett, who's building this ambitious infinite reality game. It's an evolving narrative called Togetherland that will involve thousands of players and change the way they perceive the world that we live in. Gina and Maxi are creating this Temple for Water, which is a fully interactive audiovisual museum about our mother element. And it's like built in this massive like nautilus shell, and it's meant to move and really connect people to themselves, their relationship with water, the fact that we are mostly water, that like, you know, the water that is within us is as old as the dinosaurs. It's like really their work is really beautiful. And then, you know, there's this artist is Umair, who's from Pakistan. He's an artist and an educator, and he is a deep lover of living systems and is constantly looking at like how our natural systems and biophilic design should be and are and can be blueprints for the way that we operate in this world. And along with the many other things he's doing, he's publishing this book with 50 lessons that he learned from an ancient tree. When he went to this ritual with this small tribe and sat around this tree for 2 days and like downloaded all of these lessons. And so he wrote these delicate illustrations of the advanced technology inside of the branches and the leaves of the trees that are messages for the way that we operate. Amy's creating this immersive installation to get people to kind of test experience simulations of the better worlds upon her spaceship. And so there's different interactive systems and thinking toolkits, governance systems, blueprints for eco-villages, protest music. I mean, that's 4 of 144 visions. And so where we are on this timeline right now is that we're in the first cohort. We're in this like developmental period where we're giving resources and curriculum and giving feedback and connecting, really weaving the webs of partnership for the studio. And we're working towards a unified launch in March of all of the first projects that are connected through an overarching narrative. And so all the projects kind of lead into each other and become doors and pathways for organizations, initiatives, and individuals who are leading this work in the world, and also sometimes unlikely leaders, right? Like some people who may not see themselves as leaders, but they're like in the trenches planting 1 trillion trees in a remote part of the earth, and they can be highlighted as a leader because they are as they should be. And so we're highlighting both present leaders and leaders that need to be kind of brought more to the forefront through this process, and the leadership in all of these creators. And then, you know, we'll continue to rebounce this campaign and start a new cohort and take the cohort that's current and, you know, the ones who want to keep moving into an alumni program and the ones who need more funding into a catalyst program to support and accelerate their work. So really excited for this legacy that we can leave, and we're working our best to act quickly to support these, like strengthening these partnerships with institutions and funds and individuals who are committing to transferring wealth of all kinds to move resources towards the regeneration of our planet. And we're so honored to be stewards of the visions of all of these creators, and expect to raise a good amount of money every year to achieve this mission and to support all of their missions. So we are so excited and humbled every day. And it's just this honing beacon that we sent out to say who would like to collaborate on this was very well received, and we had hundreds and hundreds of applicants, and it was hard to pick this first cohort. And we know that we can't do it without all of the people. We're not trying to be the like top of the chain by any means. We're trying to create a system that can support itself. And so, Julian, it's been so wonderful to have you as one of the captains of the pods of 12, along with Seth Bunting, who I know came to another recent podcast. And that like ongoing leadership and support for the different projects in their very different stages of development is so important. And the vision, long vision, is like, how do we have chapters of this? How do we create blueprints so that individuals in their communities around the world can lead these programs on their own, so that we can be a mycelial network of support? And so we're on the way, one step at a time.
Yeah, one step at a time is not too difficult. That just leaves us to do one step at a time. I love the work you're doing, Roxi. I'm so glad we got the chance to speak one-on-one in this episode, and you got to share quite a bit more about the Design Science Studio. As I said, there will be a micro series coming up on Green Planet, Blue Planet, and also I encourage anyone and everyone listening who is really curious about that to look to apply for the next cohort. From my experience so far, I can say it's truly a co-creative experience, and I think that's what makes it even more exciting. So thank you so much, Roxi, for your time. Thanks for your insights, for some reflections and answers on trust and capacity building and what we're dreaming for the future, and how that all makes sense in the context of now.
Thank you, Julian. It's been my pleasure. It's good to hang out this morning. Thank you.